My name is Keryn Newman. I stopped PATH. I got this nifty button here that we had made afterwards, and we gave them out to all our supporters. The Potomac Appalachian Transmission Highline, or PATH, was a 300-mile-long, 765 kilovolt transmission line from southern West Virginia to suburban Maryland. It was introduced to the public in 2008. Supposedly, it was needed for reliability, and it was part of PJM's transmission plan. Together with others in my community, we formed StopPATH WV Incorporated. We had to add the WV because they had already bought the domain name StopPATH. Anyhow, we applied political, regulatory, and public opinion pressure against the project. PJM's numbers grew stale rather quickly, but they didn't want to give up. But eventually, after almost 3 years, PATH was canceled because a better idea emerged. During this time, I also became interested in PATH's rate-making process at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Jointly with another citizen in West Virginia, we filed complaints at the FERC against the company because they were including in their rates costs for lobbying, front groups, public opinion polling, advertising, and other advocacy costs. So me and this other lady, we had been kind of wondering, who's paying for all these ads that we see? I mean, they were just saturated. Every newspaper, every TV station, every radio station. And so we found this process where we could use Discovery to look at the invoices and see what they were spending. So we thought, well, we're going to gather all this information, and then we're going to go to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and we're going to tell on them. And then they're going to take it from there, and we can go back to doesn't work that way. We embarked on a 6-year process. It took us 6 years to finish this process. We had to support our case through about 3 years of settlement talks. Then there was, it took longer, but 15 days I had to commute down to D.C. We were our own lawyers, so we had an administrative hearing process before a judge. Then we had extensive briefing, a whole bunch of different rounds of briefs that I had to write briefs, and I found out I kind of liked that. But, and some of them were 60 pages, and I just kind of went on and on. But eventually, the good news is we won. Ratepayers in PJM this year are enjoying a $20 million refund for all this nonsense that they charged us for back when it was happening. But the most important thing is we learned about the regulatory process, the administrative hearing process, and if somebody had told me at the beginning I was going to have to be my own lawyer and stand there and cross-examine witnesses and file, I would have said, oh, forget that. But because I was on the spot, we just took one thing at a time and we plowed ahead. And the most important thing is we set rate precedent at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. These transmission companies cannot advertise and do front groups and lobbying and other things and charge it to you to try and support their transmission projects. And actually, during this case, the witness that the transmission company called PATH had at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission was a utility executive that started at Madison Gas and Electric, and then he was at ATC, and now he owns a public relations firm. And they brought him to D.C., and they paid him a whole bunch of money. And he sat there and told them that not only were all these things necessary, but that, they're all paid for. They're paid for in Wisconsin. Well, turns out they really weren't, and, the judge didn't believe him anyways. So that was an interesting connection when I found out who the witness was. So, also during this time, I began to work with other transmission opponents across the country to help them get jump-started, setting up organized opposition, gaining knowledge about transmission and utility tactics, and to develop an effective strategy for abandonment or denial of their particular project. Mary was one of the early ones that I got in touch with. So I have worked extensively with 3 different groups across 7 Midwestern states who successfully challenged the Clean Line Energy projects. There were 3 projects that I worked on with people like Mary. They totaled nearly 2,000 miles of new merchant transmission. None of these projects have been built, and they're pretty much all but dead. There are other projects that have been canceled in recent years, and one of the other groups I went and spoke to asked me to make a list. So I tried to go through my memory and think about, well, who have I been in contact with when their project got canceled? One was the SWEPCO Kings River project in Arkansas, the Mountain States Transmission Intertie in Montana, Bonneville Power Administration's I-5 corridor project in Washington and Oregon, the Tehachapi Renewable Transmission Project in California. They started building that one, and then they got to a neighborhood called Chino Hills. And these transmission poles were literally towering over these people's houses, and they said, this can't happen. And they formed an opposition group. Eventually, those towers they had put up were torn down, and the line was buried through the neighborhood. Duke Energy's Western Carolina modernization line in North Carolina and South Carolina, canceled. The Mid-Atlantic Power Pathway in Maryland and Delaware, canceled. The Mark Twain transmission line in Missouri was eventually reconfigured to use existing right-of-way instead of what they were planning, and I think you have more about that, right?
You just told me something I didn't know. That's great.
Oh, well, you didn't hear what happened after.
No.
Oh, well, we'll talk later. And there are many other active opposition groups in progress around the country today. A couple that I'm watching and waiting on. One is called Residents Against Giant Electric. RAGE is their name. They are in New Jersey. You should look them up. They've been very successful. It's a 10-mile line, just 10 miles of line, but it's in suburban New Jersey, right along an active railroad corridor. So they have been very effective. They've raised a lot of money. They have had thousands of people get involved in that. And I think they're going to be successful. We're waiting on the decision from the administrative law judge right now. And there's another group called Stop Transource in Pennsylvania and Maryland. They've only been going for about 6 months, but I have worked extensively with them. And they're using very good tactics. They started with their legislators saying, oh, nope, can't get involved, not my problem, I can't take sides. And now the legislators can't do enough to help these people. So, the commonality between all these projects that got canceled is a large entrenched opposition engaging with the media, legislators, and regulators. So that brings us to my basic strategy for transmission opposition. Participation, participate in the regulatory process. Politics, turn the transmission project into a political issue. Public opinion, shape public opinion against the transmission proposal. Now, this is one of the things I've learned. During my FERC case, I saw a lot of utility documents. I think I saw every piece of paper this project ever created. I can't share that with you because I signed a confidentiality agreement, but it's all up here, right? So one of the things, utilities actually have something called a playbook. I guess it's because they're all men and they like football. I don't know. But they actually have their playbook, and this guy from Wisconsin talked about his playbook there at FERC. It was in his testimony. But their utility playbook for transmission line is old and out of date. For years, the utilities have manipulated politics and public opinion to ensure their success in the regulatory process. Now citizens have a copy of this playbook, and they are employing the same tactics to oppose utility transmission plans. If it works for them, it can work for us. So, let's talk about the regulatory process. As I said earlier, the regulatory process is designed to separate the public from the actual process and give them a utility design role to play. They have those open house transmission events. It's the same one-way street each time. I've been to them on I don't know how many different projects, and it's the same faces. They have the same non-information. They shift you from station to station. And I went to one for the Stop Transource group over the summer, and I gave a fake name, and I started with the littlest peon, and I kept asking, so what's your rate of return? What's your rate of return? Oh, I don't know. You've got to talk to him. And I went all the way through until I got to the head honcho, and I said, what's your rate of return? And he says, I don't know what you're talking. What do you mean? So I said, are you stupid? Or are you dumb? He knew exactly what I was talking about. And he's like, 11.2%. Yeah. So anyhow, at these open house events, you're supposed to go in and go from station to station, and then you're supposed to make comments to the utility, or they promptly die. The utility wants the public to direct comments and suggestions to the utility, where they are promptly ignored and buried. Later on, the utility will announce a route and say that landowners had input. And these utilities will also hold stakeholder meetings with local government, environmental, and public interest organizations in your community. And the ATC guy told me they did that a lot up here. And again, these organizations are urged to funnel their comments to the utility, where they are discounted and ignored. But then the utility says, well, the community had input into coming up with a route for the project. It's never about whether to build it or not, it's where to put it. That's the only thing they want you to comment on. So the only opportunity for the public in the regulatory process is those public comment hearings that your PSC holds. Again, the regulator sits there and he pretends to listen to you. But I've never seen in a Public Utility Commission decision where they cited something somebody said at a public hearing. It's like it goes in one ear and out the other. Like I said, they're making their grocery list. So you do have to participate there. But the utilities really hate it when you don't limit yourself to the role they have designed for you. When you intervene and you participate as fully as you can in the regulatory process, it really just kind of throws them off. It upsets their routine. In West Virginia, we encouraged over 250 people, individuals, to intervene in the transmission line process. And the Public Service Commission got very upset that they had all these people they had to deal with. So they had a status hearing, and they talked about, well, if we let all these people fully participate, 250 people cross-examining the utility witnesses, it's going to be a circus. And they used that word circus, and I thought, does that make us the clowns? But you know what? We all behaved like ladies and gentlemen. We were respectful. It was a court situation, and it worked out just fine. So you're going to participate in the process, intervene either with or without a lawyer. I was working with some people in Kansas on the clean line, and I encouraged them to intervene at the Kansas Corporation Commission because they didn't have a lawyer, they didn't have time to get organized. And one lady tried, and she emailed me, and she said, they told me I can't do it unless I have a lawyer. And I said, oh no, that's a due process right. You have every right to go in there and defend your property that they're trying to take. So they did have to back that up and admit and let several people in, and some people, they not only cross-examined witnesses, they filed testimony, and they did briefing with coaching from me. And I mean, it didn't win them anything, but they were there and they were participated, and I said, you will never regret that. So regulators believe that they evaluate the evidence, and then they make legal conclusions that drive their decision. I don't think that's what happens. I think it happens a different way. It's just the opposite. Regulators make their decision based on the political situation surrounding the transmission project. And then they delve into the record and they pick pieces of evidence that support their decision. So you need to give them the tools to deny this on a regulatory basis. You need to give them the evidence. You need to fully participate and put the best case forward so that your other work with public opinion and your legislators can encourage them to make the proper decision, and then they will have support in the record for making that decision. If you don't participate, the only thing they hear from is the utility, and they have nothing on which to base a denial. So this brings us to politics. You have to make your elected officials want to carry your flag. It takes persistence. That's all I can say. You have to persist. You visit them in person, you call them, you show up at county commission meetings and you know, say your 3 minutes or whatever they allow you to do, and you have to keep coming back. We found a video online. Somebody with Block Rickle found this video online, and in it the utility executive is talking at something like this, only of course everyone's in a suit and you know, they probably paid hundreds of dollars to be there. And he says, he brags, I get the local government on my side before any citizen knows about the project. He goes around to the local government and tells them all about his project and sings its praises and tells them whatever they need to hear and maybe says he'll do things in the community, whatever. But he gets them on his side. Then the citizens find out about it. And where do they go first? They go to their local county government. Except that county government is going to just respond with utility talking points and not really listen. So then the citizen is just so discouraged, they give up. They're done. So that's how that utility tries to take control of your local government before you even get there. But all you need to do is continue to show up and keep speaking up. Because eventually your local people will realize they better listen to you or they're out of office. And they all want to stay in office usually. So, write, call, and visit your elected officials. Bring your own talking points about the transmission project. You might want to talk about new legislation or other actions your elected officials can take on your behalf. Give them something to do for you. Some elected officials may say they can't take sides or they have no part in the decision making. This is a cop-out. Doing nothing is supporting the utility. Even the most stubborn elected officials will eventually be swayed by the sheer volume and persistence of constituent interest in the issue. And you'd be surprised at how little this room of people can look like 1,000 people if somebody's calling, somebody's sending an email, somebody's showing up in person. They can't keep track of, they're just taking a tally, but they just get overwhelmed because they usually don't get this kind of interaction with the public. So politicians are also swayed by public opinion. When they see that public opinion is moving away from a utilities proposal, they'll change their mind. So the more you continue to oppose this, the more your legislators will want to support you. So when they do, they need some quick, solid talking points that they can use, which you're going to supply them with, and then they can be your champion. Now, utilities rely heavily on shaping public opinion to make their proposals seem accepted by the people. They do this by deploying propaganda. And then they check their results with public opinion polling. Propaganda, don't be afraid of the word, propaganda is the control of public opinion by repetitive dissemination of a simple, easily understood talking point. The propagandist hammers the idea over and over until the majority of the population repeat it and believe it. Only then will the propagandist move on to the next simple idea. So how can we employ this? Here's an example of a simple transmission talking point we used for the PATH project. It doesn't benefit us, but we will pay for it. We said that about 1 million times. We said it in the media, we had it on signs, we actually did some of our own advertising. We did it over and over. And then we followed it up with a logical sounding alternative to the utility's plan. In our case, a competing utility had proposed simply rebuilding an existing line to increase its capacity. And we glommed onto that, boy. Other things, you can ask them to use existing right-of-way and maybe increase capacity. Adding other equipment and upgrading smaller lines. For that, you need an engineer like Mr. Powers, who can design a different solution. That's what they have done in New Jersey. They designed a different solution. They got an engineer. This alternative you talk about, it may never actually be built because maybe that transmission project really wasn't needed, so the need isn't there. But if people are focusing on the alternative, it may just kill the whole bad idea altogether. So then we came to the clean line transmission projects. They were merchant projects, and I'm not sure if everyone knows what a merchant project is, but it's participant funded. It's not paid for by ratepayers, it's paid for by voluntary customers. People sign up to use this line and they use that promise of funding as a revenue stream, and then that's what they use to finance their line. This was not part of any regional transmission line. No MISO, no SPP, nobody said we need this line, so they didn't have that. Their claims of need were not supported by the RTO ISO. It was nothing more than an ambitious plan to capitalize on supposed need in other regions. but that need never panned out. They never got any customers. So here we had this Clean Line project that wasn't being paid for by ratepayers, so our first talking point wasn't any good. So what are we going to do with this? Well, considering it was private investors looking to make a lot of money exporting generation from this part of the country to the East Coast, we used no eminent domain for private gain, because essentially these were investors looking to make a lot of money using someone else's land. They never offered anyone royalties or anything like that. They just wanted eminent domain, one-time payment, thank you, and we're going to use the royalties, to support ourselves forever. So that was what they used, that's what resonated, and that's what won the fight on Clean Line. How do you check public opinion? The utilities do public opinion polling over the phone, or they'll have focus groups. They have a lot of money to spend and say, what do people really think? Here's what we did. We rented a booth at our local county fair 2 summers, and the fair would run for a week. And I would sit in the booth every day. We had maps and decorations, and it looked a lot like this room, only it was much smaller. And people would see the booth, and they'd come in, and they'd say to me, it doesn't benefit us, but we will pay for it. And I thought, yeah, it's working. So a bunch of complete strangers were coming in and repeating my talking point. So that's when we knew it was time to switch to, here's a better alternative. Now that you all know that this is a bad idea, here's something else we can do. And we got amazing support. So you need to pay attention to what's in the media and just talk to people in your community and see what they say. And if strangers start repeating your talking point to you, you've been successful with it. Maybe it's time to move on. So the 1-2 punch of there's no benefit for us and a better idea can kill projects dead. That's what killed the PATH project. Another thing you need to do for public opinion is have a relationship with your media. You need to appoint a spokesperson for your group, issue regular press releases, develop a relationship with your local media. Visit the editors and the reporters. Maybe have coffee with them. You're not expecting a story. You're just going to talk about things. Your local media feeds up to regional and national media. And I've seen this a lot when people first come together over a transmission project. They're like, we're going to call, 2020 or one of the big news programs, and they're going to do a story on this. No, they're not. It all has to filter up from your local media. So that's where you need to start and concentrate. And your local reporters, they're part of your community too, so that's pretty easy. Hold regular public information meetings. Maybe once a week, once a month, every couple of months, whenever you can gather people together. You announce you're having a public meeting and here's the topic, and you get as many people to come, and you'll get different people probably at different meetings, and you can also ask your elected officials to come and say a few words. That kind of puts them on the spot. Are you for us or are you against us? But just don't let them get out of control or they'll take over the whole meeting and it'll be a political show for them. Tell them you have 5 minutes and then you may have to yank the microphone. Hold creative fundraisers. If your group has hired legal counsel, lobbyists, experts, you're going to need money. We held dinners, we held yard sales, we held all kinds of different benefits and fundraisers, and we had a lot of fun doing it, and they were also educational. We, would let people know about the project. Create your own news events, demonstrations, and other kinds of events. One of the things we did is we created a picket line alongside a well-known traffic backup. Every Sunday afternoon, this one road that went from Maryland through a little bit of Virginia and into West Virginia, which were the 3 affected states, it was stop dead traffic. It was a little 2-lane highway that went by Harper's Ferry. So we decided we'd get people to stand along the road with our signs on Sunday afternoon when we knew that traffic was going to be backed up. We invited reporters. It was very impressive. And I guess utility kind of freaked out because that ATC witness they brought to D.C., he remarked on that. He said that's the most unusual thing he'd ever seen. No, people don't do those kind of things. Well, I guess I'm not normal. So maybe you want to have that kind of a demonstration. Another thing we did, and I don't know if you guys have figured this out yet, but if you take a long fluorescent tube like out of one of these lights and you stand under the power lines and it lights up, Well, we found that out, and was talking to a local reporter, and she got her photographer and her came out to this farm, and we got about 30 people to stand there with the tubes, and the photographer had to use, the filters and some kind of a time release something. But there was this picture of all these people holding these tubes that were lit up right at dusk, and it was right on the front page of the newspaper, and that really caught a lot of people's attention. So, we planned our own little show there. Of course, the regulatory public comment hearings that I've mentioned, and they're not useless. They really can be a tool for you. Transmission owners like to stack the deck with pre-hearing editorial tours and stories about need and supporters. I found that they had done this. So that during these hearings, all these stories supportive of the project come out. So then people are discouraged from going and speaking against it. So they also work to inspire their supporters to show up at your public hearings to speak in the favor of the project. Their targets: former regulators, academics, professionals who may profit from the project, unions, and business groups. These are the people who will show up at the public comment hearings and say how much we need the project. And half the time they don't even know what they're talking about. One time some lady came and was talking about a totally different transmission project. So anyhow, you inspire your own people to go and make comment against the project. The utilities game is strictly a numbers game. How many and how important are these people that they're getting to the hearing? They actually keep little tally sheets and little numbers of how many people spoke for and against and how important their people are. So in Missouri, they were very successful. They got thousands of people to come out to this public comment hearing. And not all of them made comments, but they had T-shirts printed with their opposition on them. And they were all a lime green color, very, bright. And they told everyone, come and wear your T-shirt. You don't have to speak, but just come and sit there and wear your T-shirt. And if you don't have a T-shirt, wear something else green. Well, when the public service commissioners got there, it was a sea of green. And we have pictures of the audience, and everyone almost is a sea of green. So right there, the public service commissioners knew that public opposition to this project was huge. And when they issued their first opinion on the first application for this project, they said that the detriments to the landowners outweighed the benefits to the state. They denied it because of the public opposition. So go to your public comment hearing and drown them out with your huge common voice. Because essentially this is just the utility intruding into your opportunity to have your voice heard. This is the only opportunity the Public Service Commission gives you to participate, supposedly. And the utility has to horn in on it and try and stack the deck. So don't let them do that. The utilities also like front groups. And apparently I was told by the witness that that always happens here and the PSC wants you to do that. But I don't think that's quite true. So anyhow, the front groups they create are supposedly disconnected groups of pretend grassroots support for the utility proposal. Essentially, the utility is competing with your opposition groups by forming a fake support group. If you had a meeting of the support group, there wouldn't be anyone there. What they do is they take their talking points and they go into maybe a union meeting, or they pay a fee to join the Chamber of Commerce or something, and they'll go into their monthly meeting and give a talk about the transmission project. And then they'll say, okay, here's a petition. Everyone sign our petition. Oh, and we need 3 volunteers here who will sign a letter to the editor. All you have to do is give us your name. We'll do everything else. We'll write it for you. We'll submit it. We just need your name. So in that way, they're just trying to find people to say they support the project. They're just competing with the opposition group, but they're not doing a very good job. These groups are highly orchestrated and managed by PR professionals. So when we found this in West Virginia, all of a sudden these groups supporting the project popped up out of nowhere. And I traced it back to a PR company. And then I traced that PR company back to the PATH companies. And then I exposed it. I did a website about it. And actually, one of the things I did, they had named their group West Virginians for reliable power. And I searched at the State Corporation Commission, and that really wasn't a business name. And I went to one of their forums. They had this big fancy forum with a free breakfast at a hotel, and I went there, and I went to the organizer who actually worked for the PR company, and I said, "Who's paying for this?" And he said, "Well, West Virginians for Reliable Power is." And I said, "But you're not really an organization. How can you open a bank account and write a check? You don't exist." "Well, our clients are paying for this." "Who's that?" "American Electric Power and Allegheny Energy, the guys who own the transmission project." So I took that information and I went home, and a friend of mine said, "You can register a corporate name in West Virginia, $15, fill out a form." So I filled out the form and I sent in my $15, and pretty soon I was the president of West Virginians for Reliable Power. So then I waited until they were having another one of those fancy breakfasts in another part of the state. And of course they went ahead to the editors and reporters and gave them, here's our thing, write about it. So they did a story that West Virginians for Reliable Power is having this forum. So I get in line and I sent an email to that reporter and I said, "I don't know who these people are, but I own this name. And I'm not associated with them, so they can't say that they're having this meeting with using my name." And I gave him a link to the Secretary of State. Well, he never answered me, but I found out later that he went right back to the company and they went, "What?" And then they verified it and somebody said, "Boy, she sure is sneaky." So anyhow, I exposed their front groups. And we also countered them with our own speakers bureau. We found people in our organization who liked public speaking. We gave them a PowerPoint or other talking points, and we sent them out into the community to try and get to as many local community groups, or maybe just a neighborhood meeting, and tell our side of the story. So it's very important to maintain up-to-date web and social media presence. Keep people interested with small bits of information or an engaging blog. Not everyone would sit here on a Friday night like we're doing to find out about this and have a lot of time. But everyone will give you a few minutes here and there. Supply petitions. A paper petition at an event is a great icebreaker to meet strangers. We would stand outside their open house meetings when we knew that they were engaging with new people, and we'd stand there with a petition and we'd get people's names and contact information. So let's see, petitions, form letters we did, and other opportunities for people to volunteer just small bits of time to help your organization. So, the 3 Ps, participation, politics, and public opinion. They end up being like water dripping on a stone over time. And here's a piece of advice I give everyone when they get started on this. When I hear from somebody new that, "Oh, they're putting this in my neighborhood, what do I do?" I say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. This is going to go on for a long time. Pace yourself, do what you can do, and forgive yourself if you can't do everything. But get settled in for a long ride. A lot of people think, well, I'll have this settled by next week. That never happens. So I'm going to leave you with this quote from Margaret Mead, a cultural anthropologist from the last century. She said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So I want to challenge you to all go out and change the world at your own pace. Thank you.